important. My name is George. It's always an honor to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous, and always a pleasure to be asked. I will start off this way. I do not speak for Alcoholics Anonymous. No one has that right or that authority. All I have is my experience, strength, and hope, which was given me through a lot of people. Because when I got here, I had none. I rolled through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous in January of '94. But that was the starting of a great life, not knowing that at the time. But the book says, tell them exactly what happened to you. If I did that, we'd be here for a couple of hours. And it says, don't be afraid to share this spiritual feature. Speak of it freely. So I'll tell you what it was like. I grew up, I was born crippled. My legs were crossed. I was a sunshine baby. I wore corrective shoes and was picked on because of my name for years. I had two sisters and a mom. My mom was in and out of hospitals. My dad, I had a dad also. He worked 3 jobs, and I was the bottom of the roll, I like to say, because whatever my sister's chores were, it went downhill, and I did all the stuff that my sister's chores that rolled down to me. So at a very young age, I learned how to iron, I learned how to cook, I know how to sew. I learned all those good things and then I go out and play stickball and off the stupid in the neighborhood I lived in. So I had a lot of confusion about identity growing up. Didn't really know who I was. Part of my story has to do with feeling different. One, I was physically different, because I was wearing corrective shoes and braces until I was 18 years old. My mom was not around a lot. My sisters took care of me. They had someone come in to take care of me. At a very young age, I learned that I didn't have to stay in school. It was much more fun going to hang out outside with the older kids, because that's where I like to be, because I didn't feel comfortable. Couldn't sit still in school. If you were sitting in this room with me now, you'd see how I'm bouncing around on this chair. I still don't sit still. I talk a lot, I move around a lot, and my head is always busy. It's been that way since I was young as I can remember. When I was growing up, my grandfather passed away when I was about 7 years old. He was my life, he was my everything. He taught me how to play pinochle when I was 3 years old. I didn't know how to play a deck of cards, but I didn't know how to behave in school or around the house. Shortly after that, when I grew up in Brooklyn, we used to take, we used to hang out a lot. We used to fight a lot. We did our things as kids that most kids do. And some women were coming out of the Bohack back then. It's like a Publix, a A&P, I don't know what they have out there, a Wawa. It was a store, and we were told to help the older people. So I said, let me help you with your bags. They said, yes. I went to their house. They said, you want some milk and cookies? I said, sure. They locked the door, and they weren't women, they were men, and I was molested. It took me a very long time to tell anybody that. Today, I've dealt with that more than once. And that was the beginning of my discoloring of the world. I believe every alcoholic, every addict, something happened in their life that discolored their world, and their solution, or my solution, I should say, became drinking. That was my first choice. My story carries a lot of other things besides alcohol. I respect Alcoholics Anonymous and our traditions. I'm just going to use the word loaded. You can figure out whatever you want to put in there. It works for me. My mother had sleeping pills because she was sick. And I was drinking, and after I got loaded at my grandfather's funeral at 7 years old. I was molested. My grandfather passed away. I had all this going on, and my world was all upside down. And at the funeral, they used to drink out of little paper cups. They used to call it schnapps. And I used to take a little bit of whiskey in little glasses, and I got good and drunk. I didn't like how I felt. I went home. I got sick. And I lived in the living room. And there was a convertible bed there. And on that convertible bed, I would open it up every night. My sisters got the bedroom, and my parents had the only room. So I was like, I was like, always felt like I was not belonging, even then. And they had a commode in the living room, and in it was whiskey, all kinds of liquor. And I go in every night, and I take a little bit out, and I mix it later on with my mom's pills. My sister was a little overweight. I mix it with her diet pills because I like the effect. The book talks about it. We drink essentially because we like the effect produced by alcohol. Although we admit it injurious, we cannot differentiate the true from the false. To us, our alcoholic life seems like the only normal one. We're restless, irritable, and discontent. That was my life. That was my life growing up. That was my life until I was 44 years old. And I kept doing that. And the woman who took care of the house got fired for drinking the booze. And she didn't drink the booze. I did. And I never told anybody. I kept that lie. I cut public school. I cut junior high school. I cut high school because hanging out in the park and playing handball was more important than getting educated. And that was my growing up. I got into, my parents moved. I grew up in Crown Heights, New York. And when we moved, I really struggled with the move because we moved from a very mixed neighborhood into what I like to call middle-class white America, Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn, down by Erasmus Hall High School. And I couldn't adapt, so I kept going back to my old neighborhood. I like the chaos. I grew up in a very rough neighborhood, gangs, the whole bit, and I liked that. I was comfortable. I was never comfortable in my own skin. I got to high school, and all my friends were playing football. I wanted to go out for football. They said, you're 132 pounds, you cannot play football. I said, I'll show you. I'm going to go play football. And I got on the football team. I was playing ball, and I jumped up for a pass, and my knee got broken. And then besides the drinking every weekend, hanging out with the basketball team, drinking, I drank a lot. And I like drinking. We used to joke. I used to drink 49 cents a pint, Gypsy Rose. It was so good. If it was a screw cap, if you put it on paint, it would take the paint off your car. But I liked it. Rock good. I loved it. I grew up, and after that, I always like to say, by the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I went from a screw top to a cork. You know, I was a big adjustment when I can afford a bottle that had a cork in it instead of a screw top. And I kept drinking. I drank with my teacher in high school at lunchtime. I drank a lot. And every time at lunchtime, he would pick on me. What are you doing here? Why are you drinking? Never turned me in, and I went to school drunk. I'd say my classes in the morning was the student lounge because I was drunk, and I hung out with the basketball team. I played football. And I got out of high school. Don't ask me how I got out of high school. I wasn't allowed at my graduation because I was cutting classes so much that I passed my classes. Don't ask me how. But I didn't have the attendance, so they let me stay in the guest section for graduation. I was so drunk that I was sleeping underneath the seats, and the guest speaker was Bobby Kennedy in 1967. And I don't remember anything of it. Other than when I woke up, we all went to the beach to go have a good time. I don't remember it because I had to go to summer school. I had resentments my whole life. Mostly resented myself. I never felt like I fit in until I found Alcoholics Anonymous. I got through high school, and then I went to college. I don't know how I got there. And I went to night school, and I started off doing technical math and calculus. And I like to say my college career was based on student lounge and frat houses because that's all I did in college. I never made a class. I would take the classes that was required, and I turned around and took my electives, and I dropped all the required classes because I wanted to do different things, and I didn't think I needed that other stuff. I never graduated. I left college, and I went to work in Sears and Roebuck. I was 17 years old. That's all I was at this point. Maybe going to be 18. And I became the manager of the China gift department. I was very good at, being a salesman, doing that stuff. And I got asked to leave the company for intellectual dishonesty. I was stealing. That's a nice way of putting it. But I was stealing on paper. I was writing discounts for things and having my friends come in and buy them and go out on the street and sell it for more. That's why I got fired. I was always a little bit, I want to say mischievous is a good word for it. And I had nowhere to go after that. And through a friend of my father's, he worked in the movie theater, and I got an opportunity to become a projectionist. So I loved that when I came in. I'll tell that in a minute. And I became a projectionist in movie theaters, and I worked my way up first to on the executive board, then to an assistant business agent. At the age of 27, I was an assistant business agent to probably the third largest union at that time for movie theaters, and as a member of the IATSE, International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, and I was running the union. I was 29 years old, and I was running a union. I didn't have any union affiliation. I didn't have nothing. I just worked my way up. What I learned is that whatever I do, I got to be 100% in. I'm either all in or I'm not in at all. And if I'm not in at all, I find all kinds of shortcuts not to do what I should be doing. I got into that union, and I got put in a position where I was facing some charges. My daughter, well, let's get to the family, and I'll get back to the charges in a minute. I had my first wife. I got married. I married my first wife. I was about 24 years old. My first wife looked like my first girlfriend, so I thought it'd be a great idea to marry her. So in 21 days, I was married. And 4 years later, I got divorced. And I swore I'd never get married again. I didn't want to be married. I wanted kids, but I didn't want to be married. So I tried to make kids everywhere I could, but that wasn't happening. And then I ended up meeting this young lady in the law firm when I was the assistant business agent, right before I became the business agent of the union. And we started hanging out, and we got together on some powder, and we got and alcohol, and I made her pregnant. And little did I know that she was half my age when I got married, because we decided to get married. I found out I had a baby on the way. We decided to get married, and I found out she was half my age when we went to City Hall. I had no idea how old she was. You have to be 21 to work in a law office in New York, and she was 16. I was 32. So, and I made her pregnant, so we decided to get married, and I had a beautiful son. 18 months less, one day later, I had a daughter. Unfortunately, when my daughter was born, she was born with a hole in her heart. She had a breathing problem. And we had to make a decision. I had to make a decision at that time. The doctor said she had to go into the neonatal care unit in Long Island Jewish Hospital in Long Island. And I blew a fit. I actually put my hand in through the, where you look at the babies through the glass window. I broke one of those with my hand. That's how angry I got. I had that other issue of anger. And we went, and I moved her. My ex-wife and I, well, it wasn't my ex-wife at the time, my wife and I at the time, she kept thinking she had lost the baby, and there was a therapist involved, and the therapist said, only one or two things are going to happen. Either this is going to work out real well, or it's not. Really that simple. And it took 6 months, and the baby was home, and I was late for work one day. I was going to go negotiate a contract, and I forgot my attaché case, and when I came home, I saw my best friend with my wife, and I will tell you that was in June of 1987, and that's decided my bottom. So that was what it was like growing up. Here's what happened. From June of 1987 to December 10th of 1993, I did everything I swore I'd never do. Every moral I had, I broke. Every kind of commitment I was going to keep, I didn't keep. I lost the job as a business agent. I lost the ability to, I kept my job. I worked at the Ziegfeld Movie Theater. I was the chief projectionist. I love that one. And I ran movies, and I got to, be around and see a lot of famous people. At the same time, I had the ability to go and do road shows, rock and roll shows, and different kind of auto shows, rock and roll shows. So I got to be able to leave town whenever I wanted to and make money. And it was cool, and I kept my job all the time. So I didn't believe I could be an alcoholic, because to me, an alcoholic coming from New York was somebody who lived under the bridge down in the Bowery, because that's where all the drunks hung out. But eventually I worked my way to a very high-class bridge. I lived under the 59th Street Bridge. I spent 7 years there. And I would tell people, I can't be as bad as them. I'm an uptown drunk. That's how I looked at it. I was as bad as the guys on the Bowery. I would wash my clothes in the toilet bowl and wash myself naked baths in the Ziegfeld movie theater. I would sneak into the theater at night to sleep. I refused to pay rent. Now, you got to realize I'm making very good money. I'm not seeing my children. My wife and I are constantly fighting. It was very ugly divorce. And I wanted to give up. I always talk about my Christmas, and that is what happened. And I'm going to talk about that transformation where something happened. And I'd like to talk about a couple of angels that were on my path. One of them was a woman named Jean Mertz. She's no longer with us. She was an EAP person from the Central Labor Council in New York. And I helped start a program for my members that had a drinking and drug problem. And I put 35 people into this program, Alcoholics Anonymous and the other fellowships, but I didn't have a problem. And it was getting bad. I was living on the streets. I was getting thrown against the walls. I thought I looked good. I was about 132 pounds at the time. And I decided out of nowhere, I heard my ex-wife married the guy, my kids I hadn't seen. There was complete separation from my life. I was bouncing from place to place. My mother didn't know if I was living or dead. Nobody knew where I was because I would move around, and because of the kind of work I did, I could get lost real easy. And when people got too close, I can move. And that's what I did for a long time. In December 10th of 1993, I found out my ex-wife married that man out of nowhere. I decided I wanted my kids back in my life. I missed my kids. It's the one thing I was always a constant. Every day I thought about those kids. So I decided to use a dope fiend move, as like I always am, like most of us. And I called up this woman at the assistant employee program, and I said, listen, I know this guy. I told her about a guy who did this drug, and he did that drinking, and he worked at Woodstock, and he worked here, and he did that, and he did this, and he really has a problem, and I know he needs help. She said, okay, let's make an appointment. So we made an appointment, and about a week and a half later, late December, I show up at her office, and she said, well, where's the guy? I said, here I am. And we sat down and we talked, and she asked me everything I did, and I told her everything I did. I had nothing to hide. All the drugs, all the drinking, all the stealing. I was facing charges for labor racketeering. I had a lot of stuff going on. They thought I turned in on one of the unions. My members didn't want me around. My ex-wife didn't want me around. I had no family left. I wanted to die in December. That December, when all this was going on, I couldn't get right into treatment. I had to wait a couple of weeks. And I was sitting under that bridge. And I was just sitting there with a couple of bottles and a whole lot of other stuff. And I really wanted to have Christmas. It was Christmas time in New York. I'm under the 59th Street Bridge. Rockefeller Center is a few blocks away. And I couldn't even walk over there. But I walked over to a Woolworth, the 5 and dime store, and I stole the battery-operated pack of lights. And I went to that cardboard box with my bottle, wanting to die. Cut a hole in it, and I set my Christmas tree lights up in a cardboard box. That was my last Christmas on the streets. And I used to people when I came in, I make jokes about a lot of things, and they used to say, well, where did you live? I used to say, you can find me anywhere between East 42nd Street and West 42nd Street between midnight and 6 a.m. I used to ride the shuttle to stay warm in New York City. And then when I came in, I was put up in a place called, doesn't matter, I don't like to do that. I was put up in a place in upstate New York. And when I got up there, I walked into my very first group late. And the guy's name was Carl Kohlheimer. He's no longer alive, so I will use his name. And he said, you're late. You want to run the group? I said, sure. Get out of here now. I threw him out of the group. And he was not happy with that. And he was an old biker. And that man was my first. I'd like to say I had Indian Eskimos and angels on my path. June was my first angel. He was my first Indian, and he beat me into submission. He had me reading the 10-step when I was in treatment. I had no idea what I was reading. And then I was supposed to leave, and I didn't have money to leave. And I had a 7-day statement. My mom had a heart attack during that time, and she was really sick. And I was supposed to stay there for 7 days, and I wanted to go. They told me I was not staying 30 days like they promised, and I was planning my next trunk, my next whatever. They say relapse happens long before we pick up. Well, I was planning my pickup. And I went into him and I asked him, for another chance when I heard about my mom, and they wanted me to speak to her, and I hadn't spoken to her in over 5 years. So I really didn't want, I figured if she didn't hear my voice by now, when she heard it, she'd probably have a real heart attack, and I'd probably kill her. So we got a hold of Gene, and today they call it an intervention, and we got on the phone, and we were blessed that Gene Mertz and myself and my mom talked, and I went back into whatever group I was going to. And then I went to Carl, and I said, Carl, I need a favor. I want to stay. I said, I don't know how I'm going to stay, but I need more. And that 7 days became 14, became 28. And then I had, I stayed 32 days in treatment. And then I got on the bus ride from hell, I like to call it, because I had no money to fly. So I went all the way from upstate New York. I took 38-hour bus ride to what was called Pompano Beach. From Pompano Beach, I went into a halfway house. All I wanted to do was drink. They took people off the bus for drinking. They took people off the bus for drugs. And I didn't sleep for 38 hours. And nobody from the halfway house came to pick me up. And I had asked the cop for help. And if you know me, I don't talk to cops. But I asked the cop for help. And he said, I know exactly where you're going. He said, get in the back of the car. I said, all right, I'm going to jail. And he drove me right in front of the halfway house that I went to. And I had a fight to get in because they saw me get out of a cop car and they thought I was drunk. And they didn't want to let me in. I had a fight to get in my own halfway house. That was what it's like. That's what happened. And then the journey of what happened now started in January the 19th of 1994. And it's been a very long journey. It's been a wonderful journey. It's had its ups, it had its downs, a lot of medical issues. I've had 16 hand and back operations. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor in recovery. God knows what else when I went through it. I have a stimulator in my back. I got 2 titanium knees. None of that is really important. It's what I did so I didn't pick up a drink during all that. That's what was important. And, chronic illness, I work with people with chronic illness. I have chronic illness. Every day is a tough day to get up and walk. But my life is better than anything I could have ever imagined. The journey here is I walked into a place called The Bottom Line in Deerfield Beach, Florida. The 2nd story walk up. I got up to that 2nd story, my 2nd day in treatment. I had in the halfway house. It wasn't treatment anymore. And I got up there. There's this big guy who was about 6'2" by 6'2". His name was Bob Welsh. He's the guy that carried the message to me. He was the guy that gave me dignity and respect when I didn't have it. Not for myself, not for the fellowship, not for anything at that time. I wanted my kids back, and I didn't get them. About 6 months and into it, I met Larry, who's on with us tonight, and he became my book person. And Larry tells the story, and I'll tell one of the stories he tells about me. I would call him every night. My time was between 10 and 10:30 to call him. And for a year, when we went out for my year anniversary, he told me the story. He said, you were a lot, George, when you got here. I would tell you to call a certain time, and I'd stick the phone all the way out here. And every now and then I'd come back and say, okay, great job, call me tomorrow. I don't know if he listened to me my first year, but I felt like he was doing something that was very important. But he did read the book with me, and he did take me through the steps, and he did start me on a wonderful journey. Larry and I talk quite a bit to this day. Larry was going to move away. And he says, you got to find another sponsor. I said, no. Our deal was in the third step that we're going to finish the steps. I said, you can't move till you finish the steps. He said, I'm leaving. I said, well, we got to finish the steps. He actually got me through 10, 11, and 12 before he left. And we picked his sponsor at the time, a guy by the name of John Moser. And he became my sponsor. And then John moved away. Bob had moved away. Larry moved away. Bob came back and was my sponsor till he died. And we picked my next sponsor, and that was a guy by the name of Ben T, but Ben wasn't available, and he gave me the Dennis R, and I worked together, and my mom got real sick. And then I had to move to another part of Florida and to go help my sister with my mom, a sister that I didn't talk to my first 2 years of recovery because of my relationship. Part of when I talk about my sisters, and my older sister, who was like my mother, she died, and I was supposed to be at a 25th anniversary, wedding anniversary. And I called her and told her I had no money. Meanwhile, I was making about $2,000 a week, and I told her I had no money. And I didn't get on that plane to come to her 25th anniversary. And 2 weeks later, she had a pain in the chest. She went into the hospital. They opened her up. They closed her up, and she died in a very short time. I hadn't seen her. There's a lot of problems I caused to the family. I didn't know she was dead until I came into recovery. That was one of the burdens I carried with me into here. My other sister didn't talk to me. My mom was just glad that I was back in her life. And that was my early recovery. I'm going to tell this, like my first Christmas story. I like to do stories. It was December of 94. November of 94, I started writing my children. Let me get to my children real quickly. 6 months of recovery, I walked out of an AA meeting and served with papers to give my children. I went berserk. I went absolutely berserk in AA. I threw a chair at somebody. I knocked some things down. Bob Welsh was back in the area, told me to pick him up. Picked him up. He told me to go speak to Ben T. Ben T had to put his kids out, so I started somebody who had an experience. And I didn't want to let go of those kids. And I fought for a long time. And then somebody said, what is best for the children? What kind of custodian were you to the children? I'd say AA got real for me around then. And the truth was I was an absentee parent, just like my father was for me. Started seeing the patterns of the disease in the family, where it came down to. And I had to do what was best for the children. I fought for a year for that. So I gave my children up legally. And I hear the promises at every meeting, which went a little later. And when I hear those promises, they would say, are they extravagant promises? And I said, absolutely. It took 10 years before those promises didn't become extravagant for me. Some of them came early. Some of them didn't come at all. 10 years. What ended up happening was, I started going to these meetings. I had these sponsors. And I was up by my sisters, and there was nobody around, and I know I couldn't be sponsorless. And I went to a gratitude dinner. And in that gratitude dinner was 2 men. And I said, whichever one I see first, I'm going to ask to sponsor me. And the guy by the name of John Edwards became my sponsor. I had a sponsee that I hadn't seen in 3 years. I was about 6 years sober now. My journey was good. I had struggles. I had surgeries. I had operations. I didn't drink, and I didn't lose my sobriety date. And I define my sobriety, like one of my sponsors who taught me, as anything that changes me from the neck up. And that's how I define it. If and that's how I don't get into philosophical things like I don't try and argue what you should do, what you shouldn't do. I read the part in the book when it comes to medication. We're not doctors. It says, a good doctor and good psychiatrist is there for us to use. Take your problems to them. Anybody practicing medicine on you, run like hell for them. I was taught that real early on. And I'm grateful for that. The men that taught me that. And so I was at this gratitude dinner. And after the dinner, I said, I'll pick one of those guys. And one of my old sponsees called me. He was struggling. I said, well, there's this place called the West Broward Club up near my sister's house. I said, I'll meet you Monday. And that Monday, I went to the West Broward Club. And this guy, John Edwards, was sitting up there reading a big book. And that was the greatest thing to me because I was into the book for a long time. And I'll tell you the story because I know on your poster, which bothers me tremendously, is my nickname. And that's been my nickname since June of 1994. And I'll tell you how that name came in a minute. And he was reading the big book, so he had my attention right away. And John became my sponsor for the next 16 years. He had everything I wanted. I didn't know he was going to put me on a journey. I went over to John and I said, would you work with me? He said, well, how long do you got? I said, 6 years. He said, well, how many times have you been through the steps? And I told him what I've done and the AWOLs and the spiritual retreats and the this and the that. He says, okay, I'll work with you. I said, great. He says, and so me, of course, I want to know what I have to do. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, read AA Comes of Age. And I turned around and said, again? He said, okay, come here tomorrow and I have something for you. It's up behind me. It's Richard Thornton's book, signed by Richard Thornton, of Bill W. So I had the Bill W. story. And then I started getting into other literature. But John was the man who carried a lot of message to me. John got old and he came down with Alzheimer's. And when he came down with Alzheimer's, I was going to go to a convention with John Edwards and June G., one of the California girls for the people in California. And June was there, and it was his like adopted daughter. And I had met June and I knew her. And on our way up to the convention, I said to June, listen, I will not let go of John until he's gone. Will you be my accountability sponsor? And June G. for 5 years became my sponsor. While I had a sponsor, because I can call John up one day, he would know who I was. The next day he wouldn't. So I needed somebody to keep me on the beam, as I like to say. And when John finally passed, I picked a guy. I had a short list. Two of them I got too close to. One of them I meet with every Wednesday to this day. We go out for lunch. We're good friends. Sponsorship is a very key thing to me. It's very important. My first sponsor is here, the man who got me through the book. And I don't know how he got me through the book because I couldn't read when I got here. I got the nickname Big Book George down here. And that is my name. I know that is my name, but that bothers me when I'm called that in a group because it separates me from the group. I'm a very big traditionalist. And I know that's my name, and I know that's how I'm known. The way I got the name in, it was June of 94 or 95, it must have been 95, June of 95. I walk into a meeting, and a guy is talking about being angry. And it was 94 because I was working on my fourth step. Talking about being angry, and I'm in the part of the big book where it says, this was our course. Although we didn't like the way his behavior disturbed us, they, like ourselves, is sick too. We show the same tolerance, pity, and patience. We would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When someone offended, we said, this is a sick man. God save me from being angry. I read that to him while he's on the chair. And he said, you snot-nosed punk. Who the hell do you think you are? What do you think you are, Big Book George or something? And I gave him a resentment. About 6 months later, it was New Year's Eve, I can tell you today. And I walked into the room at midnight for a midnight meeting with one of my sponsees. And when we were walking in, I hear him say, there's a guy coming in the room that I owe an apology to. I turned around to my sponsee and said, what did you do to him? He said, I don't even know him. I don't know. I don't know who he owes an apology to. What are the only two walking in? He said, yeah, about 6 months ago, this guy walked in the room and he got me so angry and pissed off. After 13 years, I finally opened up the big book and read it, and I got a sponsor. And I went through the book. And now when I call him Big Book George, I do it with love. And that's how I got the name originally. And I stay in that book. That book is my lifeblood. I read it regularly. I have my sponsees read it. When I had Bob, when I first got to Bob, Bob said to me, read 10 pages a day. And and Larry told me the same thing. So I'm reading 10 pages a day. I get to the end of the book. They tell me to go back to the beginning. Bob passed on. And when Bob passed on, Larry had moved away and Bob passed on. And I go to my next sponsor and I say, well, do I have to keep reading the book? And they said to me, well, what did Bob tell you? They said, read 10 pages a day. And I said, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do, George. You can read 5 pages a day, but read 5 pages of something else spiritual. And then when you see Bob, ask him if you can stop. So I've been reading the big book regularly for once a month now for almost 27 years. And I still read it. And every time I read it, it comes alive. Something new shows up. So if anybody is not a reader, if you see what's behind me, that's an accumulation of me struggling with step 11. The steps are a key. I'll tell you how I looked at the steps because we're running out of time when I walked in here. And I'll tell you how I see the steps now. I walked in here, my life was not unmanageable. As long as you behaved the way I wanted you to. And as soon as you did, I changed the rules. I believed in a lot of powers greater than me. Money, property, and prestige were my higher powers. I was not turning my will and life over to care of God. God and I stopped talking when I was 7 years old, and we weren't starting because I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't have any morals. I didn't come in here with morals, so I didn't have to do a moral inventory. And if I didn't have to do a moral inventory, then I'd have to talk to God again, because we weren't talking anyway. And another human being, if I told you, you'd throw me the hell out of here. So I didn't want to do that. I didn't think I had character defects. Thank God for good sponsorship. They were kind enough to point out my defects for me. So if I didn't have defects, I didn't have to straighten them out and ask for them to be removed in 7. I love steps 8 and 9. I made a list of everybody that screwed me over. I was waiting for them to come to me and tell me how sorry they were for what they did to me. And step 10, I took everybody's inventory. And it got me in a lot of trouble because I told you what I thought of your inventory when I took it. Today, I still take your inventory. I just don't tell you what I think, which keeps me out of trouble. 11-step prayer. There was no 11th step. I had no prayer and meditation in my life, so there was no message to carry. That's what it was like when I came in here. The journey now is that I believe that I am not powerless anymore. As long as I don't put a drink in my body or a substance that changes me from the neck up, I have a lot of power today. And that power came from God, which I didn't have when I got in here. So I am still unmanageable, not in as many places I was, but there's still room for improvement. I believe that there is a lot of powers greater than me, and I've come to believe in the second tradition. That's how I found the second step, that there's a loving God and he expresses himself to me through people. And he has been for a long time. I just didn't see it for a long time. I made a decision finally on July 4th, 1994, on the third step of a church with Larry. When he asked me if I'm willing to turn my will and life over to care of God, at that time I wasn't. He asked me if I was willing to do the rest of the steps, and I said I was. And today I get up every morning and I make a third step decision to turn my will and life over to care of God. I say that third step prayer every day. Sometimes laying down. I don't get on my knees very often because of physical conditions, but I talk to God every day, a lot through the day. May not be exactly out of the big book. I've written my own prayers along the way. The fourth step, I took a first inventory, was an immoral inventory, very immoral, because I lived on the streets for a long time. Today, I take moral inventories. I have a new morality given to me through Alcoholics Anonymous. I admitted to God, to myself, and another human being, all the wrongs. I got to do that fifth step. I believe I do a fifth step today. I just did one with one of my sponsees. We go to God for forgiveness. We go to ourselves for understanding by writing a fourth step. We go to another human being to practice humility. I love what the 12 and 12 says about humility. To us, it's a word often misunderstood. To those who have made progress, it's clear recognition of who and what we were by sincere attempt to be what we could become. So I practice humility as much as possible. I know what I was. Thank you, God, that I'm not that person. I have plenty of character defects. Ask anybody that knows me. I'm loud. I'm pushy. I snap orders, but I do it out of love. It's not an excuse to be behave inappropriately. As I was once told, that inappropriate behavior is always inappropriate, even if I want to dress it up as a joke. It's not right. It's not right. If it's not true, don't say it. And if it's not yours, don't take it. Very simple thing for me to work on the sixth step with. Um, I ask God constantly to remove the things that are blocking me from the sunlight of His Spirit in 7 on a regular basis. I made a list of all the people I harmed and ate, and I was taught real early on, leave room on the bottom of that list, because if you don't think you're going to offend people because you're hearing Alcoholics Anonymous, remember you're still human. So leave room on that 8-step list. And I cleaned up as much wreckage as I could. I have the 10-step. I write mine pretty regularly to this day, and the 11-step is my rock today. I read a lot. I'm always looking for new literature. It's not all AA approved literature. There's no such thing as AA approved literature. It's just not conference approved literature. All literature is AA approved. People forget that. The conference doesn't let you use unconference approved literature in certain meetings. I came in on the 24-hour day book. That's not a conference approved literature. And that's the way I came in. And, people don't let you use it in certain rooms. Other rooms, they let you use it. That's what the fourth tradition was about. Each group has a right to make their own rules. So whatever works for you, please use it. Step 12, carrying the message. I'm doing some of that now. I do that a lot, many different ways. I work in a field where I carry the message every day, but that's work. That ain't carrying the message. It's getting somebody ready for them to receive a message. That's all. Same way it was done for me. I want to talk about my kids before I end, because that's a very big part of my story, very big part of my life. I did not have any contact with my children. In year 10, like I said, I used to say these are very extravagant promises. Well, I was blessed that year 10, I finally made that surrender that I would never see my children again. I was convinced I was over. I come to that point of new surrender, and that to me is what Alcoholics Anonymous is all about, surrender. It's not about acceptance. It's kind of, it's about surrender for me. Because I can't accept unless I surrender something. And that's just for me. I don't know what anybody else's journey is with that. And what ended up happening was, and I gave up on year 10. I swore I'd never see my children again. On the day of my 14th anniversary, it was 13 years ago, I had a call from a little girl who wanted to know who her dad was. And we started communication. She came down to Florida and visited me. I've been to New York to visit her. I've got 2 grandkids. It took 19 years. I was sober 14. I hadn't seen her in 17, 18 years, actually, before I ever got to talk to my daughter. My son I've been reaching out to. I'm still reaching out to. I've been given an assignment with that, which I'm still struggling with. We do not have communication. I believe that he's one of God's kids, too. And when God's ready to restore that, He will. Just because I want it doesn't mean it's good for me or him. Whatever reason He doesn't want me in his life, I had to learn to accept that. Acceptance without approval, one of my favorite things. I do a lot of that today. And the blessing has come. I got to spend a couple of weeks with my daughter, and took my son out and my daughter. Actually had time to sit with my ex-wife and clear away whatever wreckage I could in whatever condition she was in. And spoke to my mother-in-law 2 years ago. Been back to New York twice since then. Spent 2 weeks with my daughter. So God has blessed me. I have sponsees, and I have sponsees that have sponsees. I have a lot of love around me. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is. There was a man named Dennis O, who I haven't talked about. And I'm going to end with the man who was probably the most influential man in my recovery. Dennis said to me when I came in, George, garbage in, garbage out. If you heard my mouth when I came in here, it was a mess. If you saw my attitude, it was a mess. I lived at Dennis's house. It was when I moved from a halfway house to a sober living house. And Dennis I would go out every morning and be reading my big book. Then he'd come out and read the Bible. And he says, I'm around a bunch of years. And he was around, he died at 57. And he would read, come out, and one day he says, well, I haven't read the book in a while. I think I'm going to read the book. And I said, I'll make a deal with you, Dennis. You read the book, I'll read the Bible. And then I went through the 12 steps through Celebrate Recovery. I did it through the 12 steps of Christianity. Did another thing. I went to Crucios. I did everything I could because it's all about the 11th step. to improve my conscious contact with God. And Dennis used to say this. He says, what is God about? God is about love. Yeah, well, he says it this way. Let me put it the right way. He said, what is AA about? He said, AA is about people. What are people about? People are about God. What is about God about? That's about love. So AA is about love. And that's the thing I carry to this day. If I am practicing the principles that I have been given, and I don't mean the 12 we see on the wall, there's a whole lot more principles in those steps than the 12 that we read on the wall. Then I'm doing pretty good. And I know there are 3 sides to that triangle. I'm one of those that only do 2. I'm not that healthy. I do live in traditions. I'm a traditionalist. I love the steps. I do service, but I don't do world service. That's not for me. Too political. That's a personal thing. But I believe in all 36 principles that are written out. And I am blessed by the people who have let me walk that journey through their help and your love and grace. I've been here for another day, and I want to say thank you for letting me share.
George, thank you so much. So grateful you showed up on here tonight and shared your story, and I'm grateful we got to record that. And for anybody that missed the meeting tonight, so I have asked Alana to read the promises, and then George will close us out with a prayer of his choice.
Okay, Alana, alcoholic, and these are the 9th step promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
Thank you, Alana. And George, do you want to take us out with a prayer of your choice?
Yeah, I always wanted to make a joke about that. I always wanted to take us out with Full Nidra, but nobody would say it with me. Can we take it out with the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.